Hey there. Tonight we're travelling back to a darker time, not to castles or grand halls, but to the shadowed streets where plague doctors walked in strange masks and heavy robes, carrying hope and fear all at once. You'll drift through the life of a plague doctor, what it was like to face sickness and death day after day, to wear that infamous beaked mask, and to walk the fine line between healer and outcast during one of history's deadliest pandemics. If this kind of slow, immersive storytelling helps you relax and rest, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you peace. And drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is. It's quietly comforting to know who else is out there, falling asleep to the same tale. So dim the lights, let the heavy robes settle, and let's step into the world of the plague doctor. And now, let's begin. The year is 1656. Congratulations. You've just been hired as a plague doctor. You don't quite know how this happened. Perhaps you were out of work and desperate. Perhaps someone misread your name in the town ledger and mistook you for a trained physician. Or maybe, more likely, nobody else was willing to do it. Either way, you are now the proud owner of the worst job in Europe. Your town is thrilled. You are considerably less so. The first thing they give you isn't a welcome or a handshake. Heavens no. They hand you a pouch of coins, paid in advance, because statistically speaking, you're not expected to survive long enough to collect your wages later. It's generous in a suspicious sort of way, like a man handing you a lantern and sending you into a mine that's already on fire. They assure you it's an honourable appointment. You've been chosen to serve the people in their time of need, which is a polite way of saying you'll be surrounded by corpses before the week is out. Now let's get you suited up. There's no official training, of course, no school, no mentor, no handbook. But there is an outfit. Oh yes, the outfit. First, you pull on thick leather breeches that smell like a dead cow rolled in vinegar. These are meant to protect you from the bad air. Not that you understand how exactly. Then comes a long oil-soaked cloak, black, heavy, and slick to the touch. This is your outer shell. It repels water and, allegedly, death. Over your hands go gloves, and over your head, a wide-brimmed leather hat meant to identify you as a medical man, which, again, is more about appearance than accuracy. Then, the mask. You slide the beaked contraption over your face, securing the straps at the back of your head. The beak, 6 inches long and curved like a bird's, is stuffed full of herbs, spices, and ingredients that sound more like the contents of a cursed spice rack than medicine. Rose petals, cinnamon bark, cloves, perhaps a little mint or camphor if you're lucky. Some doctors include crushed emerald or powdered viper flesh, just in case superstition turns out to be correct. Inside the beak, the air is stale and sickly sweet. The herbs are supposed to protect you, to filter the foul stench of rot, to cleanse the miasma believed to carry disease. The prevailing theory is simple. Bad smells are dangerous, and good smells keep you safe. You are, effectively, a walking sachet. Your vision is obscured by the mask's round glass eyepieces, which fog with each breath. They press against your skin with an itchy tightness. You cannot scratch. You cannot sneeze. You cannot see much of anything clearly. But you're ready. They hand you a wooden cane. You weren't expecting this, but it comes with the job. The cane is multi-purpose. It allows you to examine patients from a distance, lift blankets, prod lumps, or gently tap a foot to see if it still twitches. But it has another function as well. Should you be surrounded by desperate, plague-stricken townsfolk, crying, screaming, clawing for help, this stick is your only defence. You're not only a healer, you are a moving target. You begin your rounds. The streets are mostly silent. A few shutters creak in the breeze. Somewhere a church bell tolls, not for a service, but for a body. The carts have already come by this morning, their wheels leaving muddy tracks behind them. Each cart was piled with corpses, wrapped in sheets or left bare. Some looked peaceful, most did not. You arrive at your first home. A servant meets you at the threshold, holding a cloth to his mouth. He gestures toward a room in the back. The smell hits you before you even open the door. A sickly blend of sweat, vomit, and decay. You steel yourself and enter. The woman lies still on the bed, her skin pale and waxy. A lump bulges beneath her neck, angry and red. A bubo, unmistakable. Her eyes flicker beneath closed lids. She's burning with fever. Her breath comes in shallow gasps. You approach, extend your cane, and gently prod the swelling. It leaks a thin stream of pus. You nod. Not because it helps, but because it's what people expect you to do. Her husband stands nearby, hopeful and hollow-eyed. You don't speak much. You mutter something about the humours being out of balance. You prescribe a poultice of crushed herbs and advise him to burn rosemary in the corners of the room. You suggest keeping a sliced onion nearby to absorb the illness from the air. He thanks you, as if you've offered salvation. You haven't. You record the visit in your notebook. You use initials instead of names. There are too many patients now, and names make it personal. You cannot afford personal. As you leave, you notice a child sitting in the hallway, silent and still. His eyes track you as you pass. He doesn't move. You suspect he's already infected. You don't say anything. What would be the point? You continue down the road, checking homes marked with charcoal crosses. Some doors are barred, others are ajar. A few families are still inside, clutching loved ones who no longer breathe. They ask for help. You give them herbs. You give them words. You give them the illusion of care. At one point, a man rushes toward you from an alley, frantic and coughing. He grabs your arm. You feel the jolt of fear before anything else. You raise your stick, not hard, just enough to make him back away. He stumbles, apologizes, weeping. He says his wife is ill. He says he's scared. You nod and follow. Her bubo has already burst. She will not last the night. You give her a prayer. You give him a list of things to burn. You move on. By afternoon, you've seen a dozen homes. Some people greet you with hope, some with suspicion. One old woman spits at your feet and tells you you're death in disguise. You don't disagree. You return home at dusk. Your quarters are modest. A single room above a shuttered bakery. You enter carefully, removing each layer of clothing with practiced precision. The gloves come off first. Then the cloak, stiff with dried sweat and stained at the hem. Then the mask. You hang everything near the hearth, letting the smoke dry what little moisture remains. Your face is red and chafed from the straps. Your eyes sting. You wash your hands 3 times, scrubbing until the skin burns. You inspect your arms and neck for signs. No lumps, no fever, not yet. You light a candle and sit at your desk. Your notebook lies open, pages marked with scrawled observations. crude drawings of boils and rashes. You try to organise your thoughts, but they blur. All the patients run together now. Same symptoms, same endings. You eat a small piece of bread. You sip weak wine. You listen to the muffled quiet of a dying city. Outside, the wind picks up. Somewhere a scream echoes, brief, then cut short. You say a prayer, not because you believe it will help, but because it's the only ritual you have left. You think of the woman from earlier. You think of her husband, who still believes you can save her. You think of the child in the hallway. Then you stop thinking. You must. Because tomorrow you'll put on the mask again and go out to face the plague. The dawn light seeps through your shutters, but it brings no comfort. It only illuminates the dust motes dancing in the still air, a silent testament to the fact that life itself has been put on hold. You don your gear in near darkness, the oil-soaked cloak stiff as cured leather, gloves pulled snug over your hands, hat tilted low, and the mask, the very thing you both loathe and rely upon. You settle the beak between your nostrils, inhale the stale bouquet of crushed rose petals, myrrh and vinegar, and step into the morning's hush. Outside, the streets are unrecognisable. Market stalls stand abandoned, their wooden frames half collapsed under the weight of disuse. A broken barrel of apples lies, rotting in the gutter, pale worms crawling over its fermenting flesh. The cheerful cries of street vendors have been replaced by the distant tolling of church bells. Once a call to worship, now the sombre yet relentless clock of mortality. Every 12 hours, a new death. Every 12 hours, a new marker in the ledger. You pause beside a boarded-up bakery, where the sweet clamour of fresh bread has been replaced by decay. Rats dart across the cobbles, emboldened by empty streets and overflowing refuse heaps. They don't wait for twilight anymore. They roam in sunshine, scuttling underfoot as you pass. You recall the rumour you heard yesterday. Plague born on fleabacks, riding from rat to human like a secret courier. You almost laugh at the image, but the truth claws in your mind. Even if it's laughable, it might be real. At the corner, a crude red X marks a house. No family dares erase it. It's a warning and a condemnation. You knock once with your cane. A frail voice bids you enter. Inside, the smell hits like a fist. Fermented sweat, sickly sweet breath, and something sour beneath it all. The patient waits in a darkened room. A merchant, you're told, too proud to show his face in a public death pit. He's propped up on a makeshift cot, eyes dull, skin mottled with purple blotches. A bubo swells grotesquely beneath his arm, black at the crown, weeping a thin, oily fluid. You clear your throat. He glances up as if surprised you've come. "Doctor," he croaks. "Is it as I fear?" You study his pulse, rapid, fluttering. You listen to his breath, wet, rattling. You say quietly, "It's the plague. It's not news." He nods, as if bracing for a verdict he already knows. You slip a cloth soaked in rosemary oil to his lips and set a small pot of vinegar near his pillow. "Keep your chamber aired," you advise. "Burn juniper in the corners. Pray if you must." He manages a weak smile. "I shall." You leave him to his fading dignity and step back into the street. The sunlight feels colder than the night. You glance at the red X and move on. Mid-morning finds you at the canal bank, where workers haul bodies into waiting barges. The water laps lazily, ignorant of the human suffering it ferries away. You see a body wrapped in sailcloth, pushed over the edge with a shove. It floats for a moment, face half submerged, eyes staring at the sky. Then it slips beneath the surface, swallowed by the canal's dark mirror. The men say they're grateful for the duty. It's honest work, paid weekly, and one hopes the plague avoids them in return. But you've seen more bargemen dead than alive this month. You move to the next scene, a makeshift quarantine station in the old monastery. Pews have been removed to make room for rows of cots. Smoke from burning rosemary coils up to the vaulted ceiling. Patients lie in shrouds of white linen. Some moan, others stare at the ceiling, counting cracks in the plaster. A young novice tends to them, his hands shaking behind a half-mask of cloth. You exchange a silent greeting, then begin your rounds. First, an elderly widow. Her gaze is bright, unnervingly so. She grips the bars of her cot, foot tapping with nervous energy. "My dear," she says when you kneel, "I keep expecting a knight in shining armour, but you'll have to do." You offer her a pale smile beneath your beaked facade. "I'm all sorts of armour, I'm afraid." She chuckles, and for a moment the horror softens. You prod her bubo lightly with your cane. It's firm, hot to the touch. "Plenty of rest," you tell her, "and drink broth, if you can manage." She nods and grips your hand, leather glove and all, as if it were a bard's lute, offering comfort in a cruel world. Next, a young labourer, body wasting, breathing in short gasps. His father stands at the foot of the cot, knuckles white, prayer beads sliding between fingers. You offer no words, just a nod. He mouths a silent plea. You write in your ledger. Male, mid-20s, advanced stage. Family present, prognosis terminal. The very act of writing feels like betrayal, recording life as if it were a commodity. You step outside the fumigated halls into a courtyard where children, orphaned or abandoned, wander aimlessly. A girl with tangled hair approaches, holding a wilted flower. She offers it to you. You accept. "Thank you," you say, as if any thanks could matter. She smiles, turns, and joins the others, skipping stones into a stagnant fountain now clouded with rot. The emotional toll claws at you. You've seen grief so raw, it scorches the soul. Parents rocking empty cradles. Siblings begging for a dead brother to wake. You have watched the local apothecary faint at the sight of his first bubo, and the blacksmith curse the plague for stealing his wife. You have borne their questions. Why? How? When? And you have no answers. By midday, you're exhausted. Your legs ache from hours of walking. Your back protests under the weight of your cloak. A cough has begun in your chest. A dry, persistent tickle you ignore. You lean on your cane, head bowed beneath the mask's weight, and take a moment to breathe. You think of all the plagues that came before. Justinian's in the 6th century, which may have killed 10,000 people a day. The Black Death of the 14th century, which claimed a third of Europe's population. And now this relentless third wave in the 17th century, returning like an unwelcome ghost. Each time, humanity adapts, survives, and forgets. That cycle comforts you more than you admit. Rejuvenated only slightly by your own grim reflection, you press on. A cluster of homes by the slaughterhouse block beckons, a place even more foul than the rest. You enter the first, where a man sits among overturned chairs, clutching his bleeding arm. He tried bloodletting himself, he says, attempting to cut away the poison. A bandage covers the wound, already stained. You take his arm, inspect the makeshift tourniquet, and shake your head. "You're weakening yourself," you say. "Stop. Rest. Let nature run its course." He scowls, but silent exhaustion wins. You apply a fresh poultice, noting the rash creeping up his sleeve. Next door, a mother tenders a hobbling son whose leg is swollen grotesquely. He limps to you, head held high. You clear your throat, he says, "I should be in the fields?" You nod, managing sympathy through your beak. "Soon," you say, "when you're well." His mother's eyes flicker with hope. You don't allow yourself to see how hollow it is. A few doors down, you find a makeshift clinic where local barbers and apothecaries argue over the best remedy, bloodletting versus poultices soaked in mercury. You intervene, gently, explaining the dangers of mercury exposure, suggesting gentler infusions of elderflower tea. They grumble but defer. You note their names. Brother Matteo, Signor Luca. Disagreements may kill more than the plague. You walk on. Late afternoon shadows stretch long across the streets. You decide on one final stop, the orphaned plague pit at the edge of town. Here, bodies are interred in trenches, coffins unnecessary. You've never witnessed the diggers at work. No one dares. Today you will. You approach, mask ready, cane tapping. Two men in tattered cloaks stand at the edge of a freshly hewn trench. They throw bodies in like refuse. A child's small body lands last. You pause, catch its shoe as it slips. The men glare. You drop it. They toss the body in. The pit echoes with muffled thuds. You lower your head in prayer. You do not know which deity still listens. You pray nonetheless. On your way home, you pass the chapel. Half its roof collapsed, its walls blackened by smoke from nearby burnings. A discarded prayer book lies open in the dirt, pages fluttering in the breeze. You read an incantation half erased by ash. Deliver us from plague and pestilence. You close it gently, set it on a ledge. Perhaps someone will return for it, perhaps not. Night falls before you reach your lodgings. You enter, remove each piece of gear, hang them to air. The mask peers at you from the hook, as if mocking. You scrub your hands raw, yank the cloak off, and strip. You check your skin for lumps. None yet. Good. You sit at your desk in candlelight and write. Today, visited 18 households. Recorded 32 cases. 5 recoveries unlikely. 27 critical, 11 deceased. Observations. Miasma thicker near slaughterhouse. Rats congregate at canal bank. Children less symptomatic but likely carriers. Remedies. Continued fumigation with juniper. Discourage bloodletting. Next, petition for additional leeches. You close the ledger. You try not to think about tomorrow. How many more will die? How many more questions you cannot answer? You blow out the candle and lie down, robe still on. Your chest aches. You cough twice in the dark. The world is dying. And you in your mask and cloak can only bear witness once more. You sit by the fire, mask resting on the table beside you. It stares up at you with its hollow glass eyes and long, curved beak, a grotesque parody of a bird's skull, painted and waxed and stuffed with pungent herbs. You've worn this thing every day for months now. You've eaten in it, slept beside it, spoken to the dying through it. You can't remember what your own voice sounds like without the echo of that hollow snout warping it. And still, you're not even sure if the thing works. The townspeople fear it, of course. Children cry when they see you. Dogs bark. Even the dying flinch at the sight. You look like death itself. Tall and shapeless, cloaked in black, with a bird's face looming above the stink of pestilence. And maybe that's the point. If nothing else, the mask is honest. It doesn't offer hope. It offers warning. You are not salvation. You are the man who comes when all else has failed. The irony is that this mask, the most iconic symbol of the Plague Doctor, is barely older than your own apprenticeship. People speak of it as if it's ancient, as if every doctor during the Black Death wore one. But the truth is, the bird mask is a recent invention. You're walking through the middle of its debut performance. The older doctors didn't have these. Back in the 14th century, physicians simply tied cloths around their faces or carried pomanders, little metal balls filled with herbs, to sniff when the air got too foul. Theories of disease were based on balance and smell and God's wrath, not bacteria. And it wasn't until men like Charles Delorme, a French court physician of all things, got the bright idea to turn those pomanders into something wearable. He designed this get-up for royal doctors during outbreaks in Paris and Rome. A long overcoat coated in wax, gloves and boots made from Moroccan leather, a hat to show your profession, and the beak. Always the beak. 1/2 foot long, curved like a carrion bird's, stuffed with whatever fragrant nonsense you could find. Rose petals, cloves, cinnamon, vinegar-soaked cloth, powdered viper flesh, if you fancied yourself daring. The logic, of course, was sound by the standards of the time. Everyone believed in miasma. Bad air, corrupted by decay, floating invisibly through the streets and seeping into your lungs. The plague, they said, lived in this air. It clung to sewage, clung to corpses, rose from the ground after too much rain. So, if air was the problem, then purifying that air must be the solution. Thus, the mask. 2 small breathing holes near the nostrils, and between them and your lungs. A stuffed wall of theriac. A concoction of more than 50 ingredients blended into a single overpowering perfume. The same mixture, in fact, was sometimes fed to patients. You'd stuff it into your beak and hope it kept the death away. And, in a strange, accidental way, it may have helped. The beak put distance between your face and the patient. The robes, sealed with wax and suet, kept out fleas and bodily fluids. The gloves and stick let you avoid touch. The glass-covered eyes protected you from spittle and smoke. You weren't protected from everything. Certainly not from the real cause, Yersinia pestis, the tiny invisible bacterium carried by fleas on the backs of rats. But you were shielded more than you knew. The outfit, ridiculous though it looked, functioned as a rudimentary hazmat suit, centuries before germ theory would explain why it mattered. Not that this made you feel any safer. For all its layers, the mask is suffocating. The herbs turn sour within a day. The vinegar stings your eyes. The waxed robes make you sweat until your underclothes are soaked. You walk like a statue, arms stiff, breath ragged behind a wall of rotten flowers. Sometimes, after hours on your feet, you forget you're even wearing it, until a child screams, or a horse rears back, or a man grabs your sleeve and calls you crowface. Then you remember. And still, myths swirl around you like flies around the corpse cart. One man insisted to you that your mask was cursed, that its shape summoned death, like a sigil carved into flesh. Another claimed you were no doctor at all, but a sorcerer, keeping plague in the beak and releasing it house by house. More than once, you've been followed through the alleys by men muttering prayers, clutching crucifixes, as if your presence alone could damn their souls. You understand why the mask unsettles them. It has no expression, no human warmth. It is entirely functional. And when you speak, your voice becomes inhuman, hollow, muffled, drifting like a ghost across the gaps between rooms. But what else are you meant to wear? A smile, a wreath of healing herbs and hope. The dying don't need to be comforted with illusion. They need to see the truth, that this is a war, and that you, like them, are just trying not to be the next casualty. Once, a barber surgeon mocked your mask openly in the tavern, said you looked like a fool, claimed his apron and saw were more honest tools than your crow costume. He offered to bleed a bubo then and there, bet you a week's wages he could cure what your mask could only smell. 3 days later, he was dead. His assistant took over the practice and stopped laughing. There's madness in the air now, not just sickness. You see it in the way people treat you. Some recoil as you pass, clutching at rosaries and spitting in your shadow. Others reach out and grab you, wailing for help, for prayers, for a miracle. They think the mask gives you power, that behind it you are not just a man, but something more. You wish they were right. You remember a girl, maybe 8, maybe 10, who once asked to try on your mask. Her mother lay in the next room, already gone. The girl didn't cry. She just wanted to know what it felt like to be the one who doesn't die. You let her hold it, briefly. It was too heavy for her. She gave it back without a word. Later that night, you passed her house again and found the door marked with ash. There are days now when you forget what your own face looks like. You shave by touch. You avoid mirrors. When you remove the mask at night, it leaves red lines along your cheeks, a ring of indentations where the straps cut deep. You wash it daily, but the smell never fades. A blend of sweat, resin, herbs, and time. It is your second face. You wear it as often as your own. And yet, you suspect that years from now, when the plague has burned itself out and this town has rebuilt on top of its own bones, people will remember the mask more than the medicine. The beak, the black robes, the man who looked like death and arrived too late to stop it. They will tell stories. Say you appeared like a spirit in times of sickness, that you walked among the dying with herbs in your nose and blood on your gloves, that you saved lives, or took them, that you were a healer, or a demon. But the truth is simpler. You are tired, you are sweating, you are hungry and afraid, and trying not to cough in a way that feels too deep in your lungs. You are not a monster or a miracle. You are a man in a mask, and you are already wondering what you'll do when the herbs run out. You begin each morning the same way, by opening your medical kit and staring into it like it holds the answers to the universe. It doesn't. It barely holds answers to splinters. Inside is a jumble of instruments, each more questionable than the last. A bronze lancet, slightly bent at the tip. A cloth pouch of dried leeches, some alive, most not. Glass bottles with no labels, just streaks of something that once looked like medicine. A wax-sealed scroll of proven remedies, written in a Latin so mangled even the local priest gave up halfway through reading it aloud. And at the bottom, your favourite, a small wooden spoon, purpose unknown, perhaps symbolic. This is what you're expected to fight the plague with. You take inventory like it matters. 1 jar of vinegar, a lump of hardened sweat to rub into your cloak, a tin of theriac, a preparation of herbs and honey, and, according to rumour, a dash of snake. You sniff it. It smells like despair. Still, better than the patient you'll be seeing today. You set off, tools tucked under your arm, like a scholar bringing books to a lecture. Only you're the scholar, the lecturer, and the poor soul scheduled to fail the exam all in one. Your first visit is a cooper, or was. He's not making barrels anymore. His wife answers the door with shaking hands and asks if you'll bleed him. He says he's full of poison, she whispers. You nod. That sounds about right. Inside, the man lies on a bench, chest bare, bubo under his arm bulging like a rotten pear. He groans. You pull out your lancet and hold it up to the light. It glints. He looks at it like it might be salvation. You know better. You make the incision. Blood pours out, thick and dark. He screams, convulses, then lies still. His eyes roll. His wife rushes to his side. He's sleeping, she says hopefully. You say nothing. You clean your lancet, rewrap it, and move on. Bloodletting. The ancient cornerstone of medicine. Galen swore by it. Hippocrates, too. The idea is simple. Bad humours collect in the blood, and by removing some of it, you restore balance to the body. The practice is tidy on parchment, far less so in person. You've drained more men than you care to count, and most of them still ended up in the pit. Perhaps they'd have gotten there sooner without you, or perhaps you merely gave them something else to worry about in their final hours. Next house. A young woman in a back room. Her mother insists on onion poultices. You nod. Why not? You help her crush a few bulbs, spread them on cloth, and wrap them around the girl's swollen neck. The air fills with the sharp sting of sulphur. She gags. So do you. You try cupping next. You light a flame inside a glass jar, press it against her skin. The suction raises a welt. It's meant to draw out the plague, or the fever, or the evil spirits, depending on who you ask. All you know is that it leaves marks. Whether it helps is anyone's guess. She cries when you leave. Not because of the pain, because she can tell by your silence that she's not improving. There's a barber surgeon on the other side of town. You saw him once attempt cauterization, lancing a bubo with a red-hot poker. The sound the patient made still haunts your dreams. The room filled with the stench of burnt flesh and melted pus. The man didn't survive the night, but the surgeon said it was progress. At least we learned something, he said. You've learned something too. You'd rather be ignorant than repeat that. You check in at the apothecary, but he's locked his doors. A sign hangs outside. No new medicines, no old ones either. Fair enough. His shelves are probably bare. You remember when he still offered jars of dried frog, powdered pearls, or tinctures brewed from ash and chamomile. Some of it was even expensive. The people who could afford such luxuries are mostly dead now. The survivors have taken to boiling mint and calling it a cure. You yourself have run out of several ingredients. You used to carry wormwood. Gone. Poppy syrup? Gone. Anything vaguely numbing? Gone. You consider brewing your own batch of camphor oil, but the fumes make you dizzy. And you can't afford to be dizzy. Not when every alley is lined with eyes. You recall one recipe scrawled in the margin of an old manual. Mix crushed emerald with milk. Apply to pustules. Emeralds. Milk. Yes, that should solve it. Another recommends rubbing lard and rose petals into the armpits. You tried it once. The patient died smelling fantastic. Your cane taps a rhythm as you walk past a row of shuttered windows. Somewhere behind one of them, a man coughs violently. It doesn't sound like the plague, but it doesn't sound good either. You keep walking. You reach the old granary-turned-pest house. The sick lie on beds of straw, some groaning, some motionless. You kneel beside a boy no older than 12. He's barely breathing. His skin is cold, his lips cracked. His eyes open when you speak, but he doesn't answer. You offer him water, soaked with a few drops of elderflower extract. It trickles from his chin. You pat it dry. He smiles faintly, then closes his eyes. You mark a small X in your ledger. Not for his name. You never got it. Just the location. You stand, bones aching, and move on. In the far corner, a man gestures to you. "Doctor," he says. "My wife." You follow him to a side room. She lies curled in a heap of blankets, her breathing shallow. He asks you if you'll try the leeches. You hesitate. You haven't used them in weeks. They rarely survive long in your pouch. But today, miraculously, one stirs. You place the creature on her wrist. It latches on. The man watches, wide-eyed as it swells with blood. "Is that good?" he asks. You nod. It's doing something. Whether that something is helpful, no one knows. But the sight of it gives him hope, so you let it feed. Back outside, the sun is beginning to dip. The sky turns the colour of old bruises. You rest on a bench and examine your hands. They smell of vinegar, iron, and fear. You remember when you used to write notes on your gloves to keep your mind sharp. Now they're blank. There's no point. Every patient is the same. Every result is predictable. You recall a joke someone told you months ago. The plague doctor's toolkit includes a stick, a knife, and a prayer. You laughed at the time. Now it feels more like an inventory list. You make your way home, but the walk feels longer tonight. The houses blur together. Just wood and stone wrapped around quiet suffering. You try not to look into windows. You don't want to see the eyes watching you, hoping you'll stop. Hoping you'll fix something. When you reach your lodgings, you lay your tools out on the table. One by one. The spoon, the lancet, the empty bottles, the leech jar, still twitching. You line them up like soldiers before battle. Then you sit, you stare. It's all nonsense, every instrument, every concoction, every half-remembered method from half-mad physicians of centuries past. You pretend it helps because pretending is the only thing left between you and despair. But deep down you know, your tools are not meant to heal. They are symbols, props in a tragic play you never auditioned for. They exist so that the dying may believe that someone is trying, that someone still cares enough to do something, even if that something is utterly useless. You write in your journal. Attempted bloodletting, no result. Applied onion poultice, no result. Cupping, mild, blistering. Leeches, inconclusive. Vinegar infusions, psychological effect only. Prognosis for all, poor. You stop. Ink pools beneath your quill. Your hand trembles. You light a candle, not for light, but for warmth. The mask hangs beside you, its empty eyes reflecting the flame. You almost ask it a question. Almost. Instead, you close your eyes and whisper the only diagnosis that has never been wrong. We did all we could. And then, in the quiet that follows, we just don't know what we're doing. The trouble with being a plague doctor isn't just the death. It's what comes after it. Or rather, who comes after it. You are not just the man who arrives when someone falls ill. You are the man who must explain why they never recovered. And people don't like explanations. They like scapegoats. At first, they called you brave, appointed you with ceremony, a little purse of silver for your troubles, and a handshake so brief it could hardly be called human contact. You were the man in the mask, the protector, the one who would stand between the town and death. But now you're the man who walks into a house and leaves it cursed. The man whose presence means the end is nigh. the black-robed harbinger of failure. You see it in their eyes. They used to plead. Now they glare. The mask that once inspired confidence has become a symbol of doom. They whisper that you bring the plague with you, that your clothes carry it, your cane spreads it, your breath poisons the rooms you enter. They're not entirely wrong. You've lost count of how many infected households you've walked through, how many bodies you've brushed past, how many sick you've examined with trembling hands, pretending that the oil on your gloves is enough to stop what's coming. If disease lingers in the air or clings to fabric, then yes, perhaps you do carry death on your shoulders like a shawl. But the truth doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that someone must be blamed, and the dead cannot answer. So the masked man must. It begins subtly. The baker refuses to open his door when you pass. The innkeeper who once offered you warm broth now averts his gaze. A priest fails to mention your name in prayers for the healers. Small things. Then the accusations come. A grieving widow screams at you in the street, says her husband was healthy until your visit. A child throws a stone. A man in the square claims he saw you spit into a well. You try to explain that you've done nothing wrong, that you've followed the advice of the ancients, burned the right herbs, carried out the prescribed rituals. But your voice is filtered through a beak, muffled and distant. No one hears. Soon you learn not to walk alone. You carry your cane like a staff, not just to examine buboes from a distance, but to ward off the living. You keep your head low and speak only when spoken to. You become a shadow, a necessary evil. You're not the only one. You hear stories from other towns. Plague doctors run out of villages at knife point. One beaten to death outside a chapel. Another drowned in a canal. Not all of them were innocent, but most of them were just unlucky. You meet a fellow doctor on the outskirts of town one morning. His robes are torn. His mask cracked. He tells you he's been sleeping in barns, moving by night. They think I killed their mayor, he says with a bitter laugh. I told him he had no humours left to balance. Didn't help. You share a stale biscuit and part ways before sunrise. Neither of you expects to meet again. Back in town, you are summoned to speak with the mayor. Not the one you just heard about. Yours is still clinging to life and power, though you're not sure which more tenaciously. You're led into a hall draped with black cloth. The air smells of incense and bureaucracy. He tells you plainly the townsfolk are frightened. They want answers. They want to know the plague isn't getting worse. You nod and say what he wants to hear, that the numbers are steady, that isolation measures are helping, that the latest batch of rosemary is especially potent. He nods in return, satisfied not by the truth, but by the sound of certainty. He instructs you to write a public notice affirming the town's containment strategy. You do so, signing your name with a flourish that feels both pompous and pitiful. That evening, the paper is nailed to a post in the square. By morning, it's been defaced. Someone has drawn a skull over your name. You try to ignore it. There's a man in the poor quarter who has made it his mission to convince others that you are an agent of death. He walks from house to house, whispering that the plague did not truly return until you did. He tells them that your herbs are lies, that your mask is a demon's face, that the stick you carry was once a branch from a gallows tree. None of it is true, but again, truth is irrelevant. What matters is fear, and in the theatre of fear, you are a perfect villain, Masked, silent, strange. You carry no sword, you bear no shield. Only blood-stained gloves and a ledger full of names that never lived to be crossed off. You begin to lose sleep. Not from illness, not yet, but from dread. Each knock on a new door is met with suspicion. Each alley feels like a trap. Children chant songs behind your back. Crow man, stay away. Mother died the other day. Crowman knocked, and then she coughed. Now her soul is carried off. You try to focus on your work, but your hands tremble more than they used to. You double-check every step. You speak gently, cautiously, like a man tiptoeing through a forest of broken glass. The tools in your kit feel heavier now. Not because they've changed, but because they no longer feel like instruments of healing, just props in a ritual that satisfies no one. You bleed a man who thanks you with tears in his eyes. He dies that night. His wife blames you. His brother sharpens a knife. The mayor sends guards to accompany you on house calls. It feels less like protection and more like containment. The guards don't speak to you unless necessary. They cover their faces, but not out of fear of plague, out of fear of association. You are not a doctor now. You are a danger managed by force. One afternoon, you are summoned again, this time to a church where a priest has fallen ill. He lies on the altar steps, surrounded by candles. The congregation watches from a distance. You kneel beside him, check his pulse, his breath. He's dying. You offer comfort, not cure. Later that evening, someone accuses you of poisoning the holy water. They claim the priest would still be alive, if not for your presence. You are questioned by the mayor's clerk. You answer with the same weary tone you use for everyone now. Flat, even, devoid of expectation. You're cleared, but not forgiven. Eventually, you begin walking at dusk instead of dawn. Fewer eyes, fewer shouts. You move quickly, efficiently, like a ghost through smoke. You visit the sick, mark your notes, apply your herbs. You say the prayers, though you're not sure you believe them anymore. You leave before the candle burns down. Some patients don't let you in at all. They say they'd rather die alone than under your watch. You respect their choice. You add their names to your list with a heavy hand. One night, you find a message scrawled on your door. Go back to the pit you came from. Another reads, your mask hides your guilt. You burn them both. You've learned now that medicine is not enough. That science cannot defend you. That the truth, when people are dying, has the weight of smoke in a hurricane. You speak less. Write more. Pray quietly. Work quickly. Leave no trace. You are no longer just a plague doctor. You are a man dodging the knife edge of fear, and learning more each day that the plague does not always kill with fever. Sometimes it kills with blame, and you are running out of ways to survive both. At first you didn't notice them. The rats, they were background noise, part of the scenery, scurrying along gutters, rummaging through refuse piles, slipping beneath doors and floorboards. There had always been rats, especially in a town like this, where food was never stored quite right and streets were never cleaned quite thoroughly. But now they're everywhere. And worse, they're fearless. You step outside one morning and see one sitting on your doorstep, grooming itself. It pauses only briefly when it sees you, then resumes as if to say, go on then. You wave your cane. It trots away slowly without urgency, as though giving you the courtesy of pretending you're still in charge. The rats do not fear the living, and they do not respect the dead. You've seen them climbing plague carts, nosing at limbs protruding from hastily wrapped shrouds. You've seen them squirm beneath the boards of the churchyard fence, gnawing at soil freshly turned. Once, you watched one drag a piece of something, flesh, likely, from a pile of rags behind the apothecary. You told yourself it was a scrap of cloth. You didn't believe it. And you've heard them too. In the silence of a late-night visit, when the household has stopped pleading and the patient is gone, there is always the sound of scurrying. In the walls. In the rafters. Sometimes under the very floorboards you're kneeling on, the rats are waiting, always waiting. Of course, no one blames the rats, not officially. The clergy blames sin. The mayor blames travellers and bad harvests. The barber surgeons blame the stars or the season. And the common folk? They blame you. But you've started to wonder if the rats were here all along, as much a part of the plague as the pustules and the fear. Perhaps they're not just a symptom, but the cause. You heard it first from a spice merchant who read it in a pamphlet from the coast, that fleas on rats may carry the sickness. The idea was laughed out of the tavern, but it lodged in your mind like a splinter. You started paying more attention. And what you noticed was this. Where rats were most numerous, the plague bloomed with cruel precision. In the alley behind the granary, rats by the dozen. 4 houses infected. Along the fishmonger's row, where scraps piled in the street, more rats. 2 more homes lost. Coincidence, perhaps. But then again, what isn't these days? Today you're called to a weaver's home, a crooked little structure with a collapsing roof and a hole in the side wall big enough to admit a dog, or a dozen rats. You knock, wait, then push the door open gently with your cane. Inside, the air is heavy with dust and sickness. The weaver lies on a cot near the hearth. Her skin is blotchy, her neck swollen, but that's not what draws your attention. It's the corner behind her, a nest of rags piled high, twitching. You move closer. A rat darts out, vanishes beneath the floorboards. Another peeks from a crack in the wall. The patient groans. You look down and realise one of them has chewed through her stocking. You finish the visit quickly. Nothing more to be done. You leave behind a sprig of rosemary and a warning to burn her linens. She won't. No one does. Outside, you ask the neighbour if anyone's been laying traps. She shrugs. What's the point? She says. There's always more. She's right. You've never seen so many. They travel in packs now. They're bold enough to raid storerooms in daylight, to climb walls and rafters. One night, you saw a cluster of them swimming across the canal. For a moment, you thought you were hallucinating. But no, they were just adapting, thriving. You begin walking with a heavier step. You thump your cane on the ground more often. You tell yourself it's to ward off evil. Really, it's to startle the rats. The town sanitation is, in a word, medieval. Waste is dumped into the street. Food is stored in damp cellars. Water comes from wells too close to latrines. The gutters are clogged with rot. Rain doesn't wash anything clean. It just spreads the filth further. You've tried to raise the issue. The mayor's clerk nodded solemnly and said, "We're prioritising prayers." You visit the pest house in the West Quarter. A young boy there is crying, his leg covered in bite marks. His mother swears he was attacked in his sleep. You believe her. The rats don't wait anymore. If a body is still, it's fair game. You try to seal your own lodging more thoroughly. You stuff cloth into the cracks beneath the door. Plug holes in the walls with wax and old rags. Still you hear them at night, the scratching, the skittering, the occasional squeal. One morning you wake to find droppings near your medical kit. You vomit in the hearth, light a new fire, and begin scrubbing your tools for the third time that week. You've started to dream about them. Dreams where they speak, where they watch you from high places with beady black eyes. In one dream, they wear tiny masks, just like yours. In another, they walk upright, carrying your cane, mocking your voice. "Doctor," they say, "we've come to help." You don't tell anyone about the dreams. You hear that in other cities, they've begun experimenting with poison. A mixture of ash and ground glass, slipped into lard and spread where the rats feast. You make a batch yourself, carefully, wearing gloves. You set it out by the bakery ruins, where the rats cluster thickest. You return 2 days later. The poison is gone. The rats are still there. Fatter, if anything. One evening, you return home to find your bed torn. A rat has nested in it. You don't scream. You don't curse. You simply sit on the floor and stare. Eventually you rise, remake the bed, and double your mask straps before sleeping. You've started marking the rats in your ledger. Not formally, just small notches beside entries. One for each sighting. You no longer bother distinguishing between plague deaths and vermin activity. At this point, it all blends together. You consider writing to someone, a physician in a larger city maybe, or one of those university men who claims to understand natural philosophy. But you know what they'll say. Interesting theory. Needs more proof. Meanwhile, another dozen die. The clergy still preaches that the plague is punishment from God. The sermons ring out from the chapel ruins, echoing through empty streets. One friar claims that cats are to blame. Witches in disguise. Some towns begin killing cats en masse. The rat population doubles within a week. You bring the matter to the mayor again. You urge him to order street cleaning, pest control, basic sanitation. He rubs his temples and says, "People are dying, doctor." I don't have time for rats. You resist the urge to laugh in his face. The next morning you attend a family of 6, all infected. The father dies during your visit. The youngest child, a girl with missing teeth and matted hair, tugs at your sleeve and says, "I saw the rat climb into his mouth last night." You excuse yourself and vomit in the alley. You begin wearing thicker boots, tucking your cloak tighter around your legs, wrapping your bedroll in oilskin and sleeping with your cane across your chest. You don't fear the plague anymore, not in the same way. You fear what comes before it, what scurries in and lays claim to the body before the fever even begins. You return one day to a street you thought empty. You find rats fighting in the open, not over food, but over territory. One bites another's throat clean through. It squeals and twitches and dies. The victor drags the carcass into a drain. You back away slowly. You stop recording patient names. You start recording rat nests, the granary, the tanner's shed, the old stable near the wall, the church vault. You tell yourself it's for the good of the town. That if anyone survives this, they'll want to know where to begin rebuilding, where to dig, where to burn. But part of you knows the truth. The rats aren't going anywhere. They're not a symptom. They're not a side effect. They are the inheritors of this town. You're just passing through. And as you walk the alleys at dusk, stick in hand, boots heavy, mask suffocating, you feel it in your bones, You can't outrun the rats. You never could. When you first put on the plague doctor's robe and mask, you thought you were stepping into a role of salvation, a healer amid despair. You imagined your presence might stem the tide of death, that your skills and care could make a difference. But almost immediately, you learned the harsh reality. Your role was far less heroic and far more tragic. You were hired to die. No one said it outright, but it was understood. The town needed someone to stand at the front lines of the disaster, to tend to the sick and confront the plague face to face. You were that person, the shield between the dead and the living. Yet, like all shields, you were expected to bear the brunt of the attack, and eventually to break. Your appointment was less about skill and more about availability and willingness. Many doctors fled the cities, some took safer posts, others simply closed their doors and hoped the plague would pass them by. You, however, answered the call, whether driven by duty, desperation, or circumstance, and found yourself in a lonely, dangerous position. Your payment came in advance, a cruel but practical decision by the town's leaders. They knew the odds were against you, so they offered your family some security should you perish. It was a grim gift, a promise that you might not return. Your days passed in a blur of sickness and death. You rose before dawn and donned the heavy, waxed robes that covered you from head to toe. The mask, with its bird-like beak stuffed with aromatic herbs, sat heavy on your face, a barrier against the invisible and terrible threat in the air. Your tools were few and simple, lancets dulled by repeated use, brittle leeches barely clinging to life, and jars filled with vinegars and herbs steeped in the hopes of past generations. Bloodletting, cupping, and cautery, treatments rooted in centuries-old traditions, were your arsenal. Sometimes they seemed to help. Often they did not. You watched countless patients fade away despite your efforts, their lives slipping like sand through your fingers. You kept a ledger, a record of the sick, the dead, the surviving. Names and dates that blurred together, each one a small tragedy. The promised rewards for your service, land, money, or prestige, seemed like hollow echoes from a distant world. Many who donned the mask did not live long enough to claim their prize. Widows and orphans bore the brunt of loss alone. You heard of others like you, sent from distant villages as expendable shields, strangers arriving to a city overcome with fear. Many died alone in shadowed rooms, their stories lost to the dust. Those who tried to flee were hunted and punished. The plague spared no one, and neither did the city. Politics added poison to the already heavy air. Aligning with the mayor or clergy might grant you temporary safety. Alienating either could spell exile or worse. Clergy watched you suspiciously, knowing your presence was a reminder of mortality itself. Townsfolk whispered curses behind their hands, avoided your gaze, and children fled your path in terror. Fear turned neighbours into enemies, and you became both symbol and scapegoat. Violence was a constant threat. One night, a mob nearly surrounded you, stones flying and voices shrieking accusations. Guards rescued you, but their eyes held no warmth, only reluctant duty. You became a man apart, cloaked in black robes and a mask that hid your humanity. You were a living exile in your own city. Yet, in rare moments of solitude, you dreamed of a world beyond the plague, a world where masks could be removed without fear, fresh air breathed freely, laughter replaced screams. But dawn always brought the stark light of another day's tally of sickness and death. Your own body began to betray you. Nights were broken by coughing fits, days by exhaustion so deep it nearly overwhelmed you. You told yourself it was fatigue, but deep inside you feared the slow poison of the plague. The mayor summoned you often, demanding report and hope. You offered what little you could, balancing truth and necessity to prevent mass panic. You enforced quarantines, watching families torn apart as loved ones were isolated in cold pest houses. Many never returned. You questioned the morality, but spoke only in silence. You watched colleagues fall to sickness and despair, their bodies wasting and spirits breaking. You clung to your journal as a refuge in the chaos, recording symptoms, treatments, and occasional glimmers of success. Despite the odds, you returned each day, not from hope, but out of duty. At night, lying awake with the mask resting beside your bed, you whispered vows to endure as long as breath remained, to ensure your sacrifice would not be forgotten, even if your name faded from memory. Your senses sharpened with each passing day. The scent of decay, the sight of swollen buboes, the distant wail of grief became familiar, nearly normal. You learned to walk the fine line between compassion and self-preservation, between caring and despair. Every step you took was a gamble, every patient a potential final encounter. You started noticing small things. The flicker of candlelight behind shuttered windows, the hushed prayers whispered in empty streets, the way rats seemed to grow bolder by the day, scurrying freely beneath piles of refuse and even over bodies left unattended. The rats, you realised, were as much a part of the plague as the disease itself. Your cloak, once a barrier, now felt like a shroud. The mask, a suffocating burden. But you wore them still, because to remove them was to invite death closer. You learned to seal every opening, to scrub your tools obsessively, to avoid the sickest patients when you could. Still, plague found its way through cracks and pores into flesh and bone. There were moments of bleak humour, a dark laughter born from desperation. You joked with a colleague about how the plague was the town's most effective tax collector, never missing a payment. You laughed bitterly at the absurdity of it all, the rituals and remedies that were no more than superstition. Yet beneath the humour lay a deep sadness. You had lost friends, neighbours, perhaps even family to the same fate you faced daily. The city's life seemed to drain away, replaced by silence and sorrow. You often wondered who would survive this nightmare, if anyone would, and what the world would look like when the plague finally lifted. You remembered the first patient you could not save, the child whose eyes met yours in confusion and fear. You carried that moment with you, a weight heavier than any cloak or mask. It drove you forward, even as your own strength waned. Your health declined steadily. You found yourself increasingly fatigued, haunted by fevers and chills. You wondered if you were already infected, but fear alone was not a reason to stop. There were still those who needed care and duties that no one else would fulfill. The nights grew longer and darker, and your dreams were plagued by shadows. You dreamed of rats wearing your mask, of the dead rising, of being trapped in a world where the air itself was poison. You did not share these dreams. There was little comfort to be found in fear. You began to prepare for the inevitable. You wrote letters to your family, hoping they might understand the sacrifice. You made peace with the idea that your name might be lost to history, your story untold. Yet you clung stubbornly to your duty, knowing that your stand bought time for others. In your final weeks, you move slower, your steps heavier, yet your resolve remained strong. You continued to visit the sick, to comfort the dying, to carry bodies away. You were the last barrier, the thin line between the plague and the living. And when your time came, as it surely would, you accepted it not with fear, but with a grim sense of purpose. You had served your role. You had faced the darkness. You had endured as long as you could. You were hired to die. Your life was the price paid for a city's fleeting chance to survive, and in that sacrifice lay a sombre dignity few could understand. The days grow darker, and the air heavier with the smell of smoke and sorrow. You find yourself no longer just a healer or a witness, but the grim conductor of death's procession. Cart after cart rumbles through the narrow streets, piled high with bodies wrapped in hastily sewn shrouds, their weight a crushing reminder of how many lives the plague has claimed. Your hands, once steady with medicine and compassion, are now calloused and raw from hauling corpses onto the carts, from dragging them from homes where the living no longer remain. Each body is another story ended, another family shattered. You once wrote names, but now you record only numbers, the sheer volume rendering individual identities impossible to maintain. The smell of burning is constant. Clothes, bedding, and even entire homes are set aflame to prevent the spread of the disease. The flames lick the sky, turning the dusk a fiery red, the smoke thick and suffocating. You often pause by the pyres, watching as the dead are consumed, the crackling fire a grim lullaby for the city. Numbness settles in your heart. You stop feeling fear or sorrow in the way you once did. The dead do not frighten you anymore. It is the silence of the living that chills you. The empty streets, the shuttered windows, the absence of children's laughter haunt your every step. The death of a child, though, cuts differently. Once, the small body of a girl was brought to you, her breaths shallow, her skin pale. You held her frail hand and felt a flicker of something that the plague had not yet consumed. Hope. But when she slipped away, that hope died too, leaving only an aching emptiness. After that, faces blurred into one another. Pain became a constant companion, but your heart grew harder, a necessary shield. Your duties extend beyond the sick and dead. You mark homes with chalk or paint, a sign to others that death has visited. These marks are warnings, barriers against the living entering spaces saturated with contagion. Sometimes you see neighbours avoiding these houses altogether, leaving the abandoned to rot, their histories buried beneath layers of dust and sorrow. At times, the sound of the funeral carts is the only noise in the city. Their wheels groan under the weight, their paths winding endlessly toward the outskirts, where graves are dug in hastily prepared pits. There is no ceremony, no prayer said by the mourners. Only the cold efficiency of survival dictates the pace. Your own exhaustion grows heavier with each passing day. The physical toll of moving bodies and setting fires is compounded by the mental burden of witnessing relentless death. Sleep becomes a distant memory, and nightmares invade the rare moments of rest you manage to snatch. You dream of flames consuming not just the dead, but the living as well. Despite the horror, life stubbornly clings to the edges of the city. You see birds cautiously returning to the rooftops and stray cats weaving through alleys. Sometimes a lone child slips out to watch the fires, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. These small signs remind you that the world beyond the plague persists, a fragile hope amid devastation. You find yourself reflecting on the ritual of burial, on how death once meant community, remembrance and respect. Now it is hurried and anonymous, dictated by necessity rather than reverence. The quiet graves on the city's edge are filled with nameless bodies, a testament to lives erased without ceremony. The scent of smoke, ash and decay fills your senses constantly. It clings to your clothes, your skin, your breath. You wash as often as you can, but the smell lingers, a reminder that death follows you everywhere. Even when you close your eyes, the image of burning pyres is seared into your mind. At night, the city is eerily silent except for the crackle of distant flames and the occasional wail of grief carried on the wind. You lie awake, listening to the sounds that mark the end of another day. The last breath taken, the final flicker of a candle, the slow extinguishing of life. You wonder how many more days like this you can endure, how many more bodies you will carry, how many more fires you will light. The weight of it presses on your soul, but you have no choice but to continue. The city needs you, even if it cannot say so. One evening, you watch as a young boy is brought to the pest house, his small body covered in sores and bruises. His mother follows silently, tears streaming down her face. You place your hand on the boy's fevered brow and promise him comfort, though you know well the chances are slim. The boy's frightened eyes meet yours briefly, and in that moment the enormity of your role strikes you anew. You have become more than a healer or a witness. You are the keeper of memories, the guardian of a city's final moments. The dead have ceased to frighten you. It is the silence of the living, the absence of voices and laughter, that haunt you most deeply. The fires you light burn not only the bodies, but also the fragments of a life once lived. You think of the families now broken, the homes abandoned, the futures erased. The weight of sorrow is almost unbearable, yet you carry it silently, determined to serve until your strength fails. Each day blends into the next. The smell of smoke and ash is a constant companion, mingling with the metallic tang of blood and the sickly sweet scent of decay. You breathe it all in, a bitter perfume that clings to your very being. You find small moments of grace in the midst of the devastation. A brief smile from a survivor, a flower blooming defiantly in a cracked stone wall, a bird's song breaking the silence. These fleeting glimpses remind you that life persists, even in the darkest times. Yet the burden of your task never lightens. You continue to cart the dead, to mark the homes, to tend to the few who remain. Your hands grow rough, your heart heavy. The city around you changes, its pulse slowing, its breath growing shallow. You wonder how many more fires you will set, how many more tears you will witness. The plague is relentless, and so is your duty. You are the unseen flame in the night, burning away the past to make way for a future you may never see. Your nights are restless, filled with dreams of flames and shadows. Sometimes you dream of the faces of those you could not save, their eyes accusing and sad. You wake with a start, heart pounding, the memory lingering like smoke in the air. Despite the exhaustion and sorrow, you press on. There is no choice. The city needs you to carry this burden, to hold the line until the plague finally passes. You are the quiet force at the city's heart, the last light against the encroaching darkness. One day, as you prepare to leave the pest house, A woman approaches, her eyes red from tears. She clutches a small bundle, a child barely alive. She begs you to do what you can. You nod, your hand steady despite the weariness. You take the child into your care, knowing the odds but refusing to surrender hope. You become the bearer of grief and the bearer of fragile hope. Your days are spent in the shadow of death, but your heart clings to the possibility of life. You are the city's silent sentinel, standing watch over its last breaths. The fires you light are both destruction and cleansing. They burn away the plague's physical toll and the sorrow that threatens to consume the living. In their glow, you see the city's pain and resilience intertwined. As the smoke rises into the night sky, you find yourself thinking of the future. A future where the streets will once again bustle with life, where children will play without fear, and where laughter will return. You carry this vision with you, a beacon in the darkness. The plague has taken much, but it has not taken your resolve. You are a witness, a guardian, a healer of souls as much as bodies. You stand firm in the face of despair, carrying the city's sorrow with dignity and strength. With every fire set, every body tended, every home marked, you write a story of endurance and sacrifice. Your role is grim, but it is vital. You are the thread that holds the city's fragile hope together. Though the days are long and the nights longer, you find strength in your duty. You are the keeper of the city's memory, the guardian of its grief, and the harbinger of its eventual healing. The smoke that fills the sky is a reminder of loss and renewal. You watch the flames dance and flicker, knowing that with the end of each fire, a small part of the plague's hold weakens. You carry on, step by heavy step, through the streets marked by death and sorrow. You carry on because the city needs you, even if it cannot say so aloud. In the quiet moments before dawn, you breathe in the cold air, filled with smoke and ash. You close your eyes and imagine a day when the fires no longer burn, when the city wakes from its nightmare. Until then, you stand watch. You carry bodies, light fires, and mark homes. You carry the city's sorrow with silent strength, a guardian in the funeral by firelight. And as the flames flicker and die, you find a strange comfort in their glow, a promise that even in the darkest times there is light. The world of plague doctors was one filled with hardship, but also ridicule. From the very first day you donned your heavy waxed cloak and the infamous beaked mask, you became a figure of mockery among those who called themselves healers. The monks preached from their pulpits that the plague was divine punishment, a scourge sent by God to chastise sinners. Their remedy was prayer and repentance, and any other method was met with suspicion or disdain. Barber surgeons flaunted their razors and leeches, confident in the ancient art of bloodletting, certain that restoring the balance of humours was the only true cure. They laughed at your costumes and potions, dismissing your efforts as foolishness. Apothecaries sold their exotic mixtures in fragrant shops, promising cures that too often offered only false hope. Amidst this cacophony of belief and rivalry, you stood alone, the oddity wrapped in leather and herbs, wielding a wooden cane to keep distance from the sick. Your mask, stuffed with pungent herbs, was meant to protect you from the bad air, the miasma believed to spread disease. But to many, it was a symbol of fear and superstition. Children ran from you, adults crossed themselves, and whispers of curses followed your steps. You were seen as a harbinger of death, a figure both feared and ridiculed. In taverns and town squares, fierce debates raged between monks, barbers, apothecaries, and doctors. You listened, often silently, as they argued over the cause and cure of the plague. Monks decried sin and demanded repentance. Barbers boasted of their bleeding skills, and apothecaries touted their latest remedies. When drawn into argument, you defended your observations and cautious treatments, only to be met with scorn and accusations of heresy. Despite the mockery, you persevered. Every day you risked your life tending the sick and dying, gathering notes and patterns to better understand this relentless killer. Your journals grew heavy with symptoms, treatments attempted, and outcomes observed. Some patients showed signs of relief, but many succumbed despite every effort. Your methods were primitive, but grounded in experience and the desperate hope for a breakthrough. The plague fractured the medical community, weakening the city's response. Instead of unity, there was rivalry and distrust. The monks urged prayers, the barbers bled their patients, and the apothecaries sold potions. You stood between superstition and the beginning of scientific thought, trying to bring order to chaos. Hostility was common. On several occasions, you faced public challenges from barber surgeons accusing you of recklessness or quackery. You stood your ground, citing cases where your care had eased suffering or prevented spread. Some in the crowd listened, others jeered. Behind closed doors, a few expressed grudging respect for your courage and cautious approach, yet publicly, mockery persisted. Small victories fueled your resolve. A child's fever breaking, a household spared through quarantine, symptoms relieved by herbal infusions. These fragile hopes kept you moving through the darkness. But the city remained divided, trust broken, public health fragmented. None could stop the plague alone. Lonely nights followed, filled with the groans of the dying and the whispers of the fearful. The burden of isolation pressed heavily upon you, as did the constant threat of death. Yet you refused to falter. Your mask and robes were more than protective gear. They were symbols of endurance, sacrifice, and a flicker of hope that someday this nightmare would end. The city would survive, as it always had before. And when it did, it would remember those who faced the darkness without retreat. True heroes hidden beneath masks and robes, fighting not only disease but ignorance and fear. Until that day you walk your lonely path, scorned but steadfast, the plague doctor, outcast, healer, and unsung protector. You spend long hours moving through the city's darkest corners, entering homes where hope has long since fled, and despair sits thick in the air. You carry with you not just herbs and remedies, but a heavy weight of responsibility. Families look to you with fear, suspicion, but sometimes, just sometimes, with a faint glimmer of trust. In those moments, you feel the full burden and blessing of your role, to be the thin line between death and mercy in a city overwhelmed by plague. Your robes, heavy and stiff with wax and leather, made you an odd sight. Children ran in terror at the sight of the bird-like mask, and some adults crossed themselves as you passed by. You were seen as both a harbinger of death and a fool, a contradiction that left you neither respected nor truly feared. You sought knowledge wherever you could find it, studying ancient texts and gathering the fragmented wisdom of those who had faced plagues before. You experimented with herbal remedies, isolation tactics, and rudimentary hygiene measures. But every success was fleeting. Every step forward met with 2 steps back as the plague swept mercilessly through the city. The tension between you and other medical practitioners was palpable. At times, you attended councils where monks preached repentance, barbers demanded bloodletting, and apothecaries pushed their potions. Arguments flared, voices raised, and the city's response to the plague fractured. It was a war not just against disease, but against ignorance, fear, and pride. In the quiet moments between the horrors, you wondered if your efforts mattered at all. Yet, when a child's fever broke, or a family was spared from infection, those small victories rekindled your resolve. You were a sentinel in a city under siege, a lone figure standing between life and death. And though you were mocked, feared, and misunderstood, you embraced your role with solemn dignity. The plague doctor was more than a costume or a cure. It was a symbol of endurance, sacrifice, and the fragile hope that one day this nightmare would end. The reality of the plague was harsh. Days brought devastation, empty homes, deserted markets, and streets littered with death. The plague doctor was a constant presence amidst this decay, a figure both reviled and relied upon. In some ways, your beaked mask became a talisman, a strange sort of protection not only from disease, but from the despair that threatened to overwhelm the city. You found yourself drawing strength from this symbol, even as others mocked it. There were moments when you questioned your sanity. The endless exposure to death, the hostility of those around you, and the heavy burden of responsibility pressed down upon your shoulders. But you pushed these doubts aside, focusing on the task at hand. When you moved through the city's alleys and courtyards, the whispers followed you like shadows. People said the mask was cursed, that the plague doctor was an omen of doom. Yet some still dared to hope that you were a guardian, standing between the living and the dead. Your work was lonely, your rewards few, but your resolve never wavered. You held on to the belief that even in the darkest of times, compassion and perseverance could make a difference. The city would eventually survive this plague, as cities had survived before. And when it did, it would remember those who had faced the darkness without flinching. True heroes hidden beneath masks and robes, fighting not just the disease, but ignorance and fear. Until that day, you walk your lonely path, scorned but steadfast, the plague doctor, outcast, healer, and unsung protector. The plague had finally started to fade from the city's streets. The haunting sound of death carts piled high with corpses had become less frequent, and the heavy silence that once smothered every alley began to lift. Windows, once tightly shuttered against the deadly air, cracked open to admit cautious beams of sunlight. Life, battered but persistent, was returning to a place that seemed forsaken. You stand at the threshold of this fragile new dawn, removing the infamous beaked mask that has been both your shield and your burden. The weight of the mask, lifting from your face, does not bring relief as you had hoped. Instead, a new heaviness settles in your chest. Your reflection in a cracked mirror shows a man changed by suffering. Hollow eyes rimmed with exhaustion, cheeks sunken from sleepless nights and unending grief. The person you see is a ghost of the man you once were, forever marked by the plague. Those who survived look at you with a strange mixture of emotions, gratitude mixed with suspicion, pity tinged with fear, and sometimes thinly veiled contempt. To many, you are the plague incarnate, a walking symbol of death itself. Children shy away at your approach. Mothers clutch their children closer. Even old acquaintances avoid your gaze. You try to shed the emotional armour you wore for so long, the mask, the robes, the protective distance. But memories cling stubbornly. Faces of the lost crowd your dreams like shadows. The screams, the stillness, the stench of decay. They invade your waking moments and sleep alike. Night after night, you awaken gasping, drenched in cold sweat, your throat raw and aching as if the mask's weight still presses upon your lungs, the wooden cane slipping from clammy hands. Your body bears the marks of the ordeal too. Bruises, cuts and burns from long days tending the ill throb with lingering pain. Your hands tremble, recalling every life they touched and every body they lifted. A deep weariness settles in your bones, a hollow ache lodged within your chest that no amount of rest can ease. Yet the city begins its slow, tentative recovery. New life pushes through cracked stones and burned earth. Flowers bloom where corpses once lay. Laughter cautiously returns to bustling markets. Smoke rises from chimneys bearing the scent of cooking fires. The world is reborn, but you feel estranged, a stranger among the living. Neighbours you once aided now avoid you, uncertain if you are friend or lingering curse. Rumours whisper that the plague doctor has gone mad or still carries the sickness within. These whispered fears cut deeper than any blade. You reach out, seeking connection, but find only distance. The relentless grief and trauma have reshaped you, altering how you see yourself and the world. Simple conversations feel strange. Familiar faces seem unfamiliar. You are isolated, even among those who survived. The nights are the hardest. You find your way to the ruins of the old chapel, where prayers for the dead still echo among crumbling stone. There you kneel, whispering the names of those lost too soon. Friends, strangers, the many you carried in your arms in their final moments. In this sacred silence, you seek a fragment of peace, a balm for your weary soul. Slowly, you come to understand that the plague's toll extends far beyond the bodies it claimed. It carved deep wounds into hearts and minds, scars invisible to the eye, but no less real. Survivors bear the weight of trauma, grief, and loss in ways even time may never fully heal. Your story does not end with a triumphant celebration or a hero's welcome. It unfolds quietly, in the slow, difficult work of healing both the city and yourself. You are a survivor of a nightmare few will remember. A man who faced death cloaked in leather and herbs, who carried hope amid despair. Though you may never feel whole again, your courage stands as a beacon, a testament that even in the bleakest times, the human spirit endures. As the days stretch longer and seasons shift, you reclaim fragments of your lost life. You relearn the gentle rhythm of sleep without the suffocating mask. You breathe deeply without dread and meet faces without flinching. Yet memories, sharp and unyielding, remain. The weight of every soul lost, every failed treatment, every family torn apart shadows your path. You find new purpose in passing on what you learned. In dimly lit rooms, flickering candlelight casts dancing shadows as you share stories of courage and caution. You teach the importance of observation, isolation, and compassion. The lessons hard earned in the crucible of plague. Your voice bridges the chasm between a dark past and a hopeful future. Though the mask no longer hides your face, The wisdom you carry shapes a city determined to be better prepared. Sometimes, when the night is deepest, you catch yourself reaching for the mask, a reflex born of years battling an unseen enemy. But each time you resist, anchoring yourself in the present, refusing to be haunted by the past. You stand quietly, listening to distant church bells tolling for the dead, feeling the slow pulse of life reawakening in the streets. You understand the plague's shadow will never fully lift. It lives on in stories, scars and souls it touched. But within that shadow, you find a fragile peace. The city will grow and heal. New generations will dance in fields where silence once reigned. You will walk among them, forever changed, a living testament to survival. Your role as plague doctor may be over, but your story, your sacrifice, and your lessons endure. In time, you hope, the world will be kinder, wiser, and more vigilant. For now, you breathe deeply, unmasked, and face the uncertain dawn. You are survivor, witness, quiet hero, woven into the tapestry of a city reborn. And though you may never feel whole again, your courage burns bright, a light against the darkest night. Days turn into weeks, and the city slowly pulls itself from the jaws of death. The streets, once littered with abandoned belongings and the remnants of hurried burials, begin to clear. You see farmers return to their fields, merchants reopen their shops, and children's laughter tentatively pierce the silence. Yet, amidst this revival, a deep emptiness clings within you. The scars of loss are not visible like wounds. They are etched into the soul, carried in the quiet moments when the world seems still. Each morning you rise with a weariness that no sleep can alleviate. The absence of your mask leaves your skin exposed to the chill of dawn, and you shiver not just from the cold, but from memories that linger like a shadow at the edges of your mind. The nights are the hardest, when dreams revisit you with relentless vividness. You see faces, friends, strangers, the innocent and the damned, each frozen in their final moments. You hear the pleading whispers, the last gasps, the unbearable silence that followed. You walk the streets, trying to reclaim the life that once was yours. Yet the city looks unfamiliar, and you feel like a ghost wandering a place that no longer feels like home. People cross the road to avoid you. Mothers pull their children away when you pass. Even those you once comforted now regard you with unease, as if you carry a darkness no one dares to touch. The burden you bear is not only the weight of the dead, but the crushing loneliness of survival. You have lived through horrors that no words can fully capture, and that distance isolates you from others. The companionship you seek is elusive, replaced by a cold silence that presses against your soul. Slowly, you begin to share your story. Not the gruesome details that might terrify, but the lessons learned in the depths of despair. You teach that vigilance and compassion are shields against darkness. You speak of hygiene, isolation, and kindness as weapons stronger than any sword. Your words find reluctant ears. Some listen with hope, others with skepticism, but the seeds of knowledge are planted. In moments of quiet, you find small comforts. A warm fire, the gentle turning of pages in a well-worn book, the aroma of herbs tending to your weary body. These simple acts tether you to the world, reminding you that life, however fragile, endures. The city rebuilds around you. New homes rise from the ashes. Gardens bloom where graves once marked the earth. The clatter of footsteps replaces the silence. Songs return to the air. Yet the memory of the plague lingers, a shadow that shapes the future. You walk these streets, changed and marked, carrying the story of survival. Your role as Plague Doctor may have ended, but your journey continues. You are witness to humanity's resilience and its fragility. Your scars, both seen and unseen, tell a story that must never be forgotten. As dawn breaks over a city rising from ruin, you breathe deeply, unmasked and unbroken, ready to face the uncertain future. The plague has passed, but your courage lights the way forward, a beacon in the lingering darkness.